3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. No point in bearing the lead, I guess. I absolutely love this movie, and it's my favorite of the year. I love it for its colorful characters, each immediately and entirely distinct in personality and voice. And not just the 3 main characters, but every character. I love it for the rich, unique world it builds, fully realized and lived in. I'm actually from Missouri, and even though Ebbing is a fictional place, it feels like I've been there. I mean, we only go to like 7 locations throughout Ebbing in the movie, and I still feel like it's a real town that I've been to. I love it for its Coen-esque tone, alternating from bleak nihilism to eccentric farce and back again with aplomb, somehow never really feeling uneven. I love it for its story structure, for its setups and payoffs, for its false setups and lack of payoffs, for its setups and reversals. It's one thing to tell an interesting story, it's another to tell it in such an interesting and surprising way. And I love that when you kind of step back and piece together the cause and effect relationship of the various plot events, which isn't immediately obvious, the movie may even start to read a little differently. And that is not a coded way of saying if you didn't like it, you didn't get it. I am definitely not saying that. I'm mostly talking about myself. I've seen the movie 3 times now, and every time I've watched it, I've noticed new things and gotten a somewhat new appreciation for each of the 3 main characters. The 3 main characters are Mildred Hayes, played by Frances McDormand, congratulations, Ebbing Police Chief William Willoughby, played by Woody Harrelson, and Ebbing Police Officer Jason Dixon, played by Sam Rockwell, congratulations Sam. I guess it'll be kind of awkward now if they end up not winning their respective categories, and I'll look kind of silly, but 1, they're going to win. And 2, no one watches these anyway, so. The story takes place 7 months after the abduction and brutal murder of Mildred's daughter, Angela Hayes, which is when Mildred buys the eponymous billboards demanding answers of Chief Willoughby for not making any arrests in that time. And I have a policy in these videos to only reveal as much plot as the trailers / other reviewers do. And yet every year I get accused of not being spoiler free. Go figure. But in this case, the trailer doesn't really give you much more than that one sentence I just said. Mildred Hayes, daughter murdered, billboards, how come, Dixon doesn't like it, and then a bunch of contextless clips of people doing stuff that doesn't tell you much without context. So just be aware the setup I just gave you, and by extension the setup the trailer gives you, only takes you like 8 or 9 minutes into the movie. I only point this out because the trailers I've seen look like they might be selling a bit of a different movie than the one that I saw. And the setup they give you might be a little deceiving and give you the wrong expectations. There's a scene between Mildred and Willoughby that takes place about 15 minutes in. Yes, I was timing. And some of the things revealed in this conversation really recontextualize the whole grieving mother antagonizes the police into action thing. I saw a comment from someone on Reddit who apparently hated the movie because, quote, the movie was over in the first 10 minutes. First of all, bro, it was 15 minutes. Second of all, it's not that the movie was over in the first 10 minutes, it's that the movie revealed itself to be a different kind of movie than the one you were expecting. If you're looking for a movie about a woman who's had enough of the bullshit and is trying to right an injustice and is speaking truth to power to the cops who aren't doing their jobs, this ain't that. I don't want to give away everything that's revealed in this early scene between Mildred and Willoughby, even though part of me feels like the entire first act is free game for me to talk about. The most important thing to know is that the cops really did seem to do everything they could have to catch Angela's killer. And Mildred isn't exactly being reasonable with what she expects them to do. So when Willoughby says,
I'd do anything to catch your daughter's killer, I don't think those billboards is very fair.
He's really not wrong. So it's important to note up front that Mildred isn't exactly in the right here, and that things are a little bit more complicated than that. And as much as it may seem that Mildred is the protagonist and Dixon is the antagonist, this movie pretty much does away with any concept of protagonist and antagonist. Everyone's pretty antagonistic.
I got nothing to arrest you for.
Not yet, you ain't.
Mildred is completely fearless and foul-mouthed, and there's no bridge she won't burn. Not police, nor priest, nor dentist. But she's in pain. She's suffering. She's lashing out, trying to make sense of her daughter's death and find someone to hold responsible for her suffering. Which is a dangerous pursuit. Martin McDonagh's first film, In Bruges, which is incidentally a big reason why I still bother to make these, was about a character confronting his shortcomings and debated how we should be punished or judged for the evil we've done. Is guilt a punishment in itself? Is contrition a factor? Etc. Mildred's struggle in Three Billboards is the opposite side of that coin. How do we come to terms with the evil done to us? And the movie's answer is an apologetic shrug. Mildred putting up the billboards is inherently an act of futility, in that it doesn't really solve any problem, but it makes her feel like she's doing something. It makes her feel powerful when she has no power. And if you're paying attention, both Willoughby and Dixon both do big things in the movie to try to feel powerful when they have no power, to try to take control of a situation they have no control over. And working through this frustration, this powerlessness, is definitely what the movie's about, more so than justice or speaking truth to power. The movie's about coping, and largely about people failing to cope. As a woman with seemingly nothing left to lose, Mildred does some pretty terrible things. And even though she eventually kinda sees that her anger is misplaced,
All this anger, man, it just begets greater anger.
that doesn't absolve her of the bad things she's done, and I don't think we're supposed to see her as absolved. Dixon's done terrible things too, both things we see him do in the movie and things that are alluded to that he did before the movie. And this is really what's been dominating the conversation about Three Billboards for the last couple of months. And if you've paid attention at all to that conversation, given what I just said about Mildred, you probably already know what I'm going to say about Dixon. But in the interest of being spoiler-free, fair warning, I'm going to talk not plot points, but vague, broad strokes character arcs. And if you don't even want to hear that, I think you're kind of silly, but you may fast forward to this part of the video to skip it. So Dixon has something resembling a redemptive character arc. And he does several things to get there, but the biggest thing he does is a vaguely heroic / self-sacrificing gesture. And some people have taken this as an absolution of sorts for the various terrible things he's done. Which is kind of weird, right? I mean, Hannibal Lecter has a vaguely redemptive arc in Silence of the Lambs. He helps Clarice catch a serial killer in time to save his latest would-be victim, but that doesn't mean we forgive him for eating this dude's face. I encourage everyone to read up on the conversation surrounding Dixon, because I think it's an important and worthwhile conversation. And it's not even that I disagree with the conclusion, just kind of with the premise. I don't think Dixon is absolved of much, if anything. In fact, if you think about where his vaguely self-sacrificing / heroic gesture brings him as a character, it brings him to a place where he should have already been to begin with. It's not that Dixon was a bad guy who suddenly became a good guy. Dixon was a bad guy who hinted he may not be all bad. And maybe there's still hope for him. And listen, if you still take issue with that, that's fine. If the things Dixon does are hard for you to look past, perhaps because they're a little more real and may hit closer to home than a cannibal eating faces, I don't blame you. Like I said, I'm not trying to tell anyone they're wrong for not liking the movie. But that part about hinting that there's still hope for Dixon brings up something else about the movie that I love. There's both an implied history with these characters, and there's implied action after the movie's over. It suggests that this is a much larger story that we're only seeing a part of, and it makes the characters and the world all the more real to suggest that they would exist whether we're watching or not. Part of a screenwriter's job is to not only create a literal series of events to make up a story, but also to decide where within that series of events to begin and end the story. And you definitely feel that here. This movie could have been 3 hours long, with an extra half hour at both the front and back end. And while I would happily watch 3 or 5 or 10 hours with these characters, I'm glad the story starts and ends when it does. A different story scope would change theme, it would change arc, and would basically make a different movie. Maybe the movie some people seem to be expecting this one to be. But I love this one because it's difficult, because it's nuanced, because it's surprising. Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri is the kind of movie that demands to be wrestled with. And having wrestled with it over 3 viewings and a reading of the screenplay, so worth it.
Why don't you put that on your Good Morning Missouri fucking wake up broadcast, bitch?